Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, EQA Nostalgia here, and it is time once again to talk about Pantheon, Rise of the Fallen. They just had a phenomenal podcast last night. I'm going to be giving you guys an abridged version of that, but I highly recommend you check out the complete podcast. If you missed it, it is up on their channel. I will be linking that in the description below. Things are looking really good, and this is a pre-alpha. They kept stressing that this is pre-alpha, and a lot of things are placeholders, such as the character models. Things like that are going to be getting replaced, but they've been focusing mostly on how to flesh out the combat, spells, statistics, things like that, getting the world finished. They mentioned that they are having internal playtests weekly just to kind of weed out all of the bugs and things that might be a problem. They've been focusing on optimization now rather than later because they don't want to have a repeat of what happened with Vanguard. They get all the way to the end of Vanguard, and as a lot of you probably are aware, that game had optimization issues and it had a lot of bugginess, and it's just something that I don't think Brad McQuaid wants to repeat, and it's good to hear him say that. Knowing that Visionary Realms is taking their time, they're going through this content and they're seeing problems, they're fixing problems and correcting them as they go along, rather than just doing everything in post, I think that's really nice to hear. And I think it's a very good approach to game design. I don't know anything about game design, but it seems to me like you would want to kind of clean up as you go along, rather than try to clean up all the mess that's left over at the end. And I have to say, even for stuff that is placeholder, this is looking really good. The world especially looks really good. I'm loving how lived in everything feels here. It's very much channeling that old EverQuest Online Adventures feel. A lot of you know that's the first MMO I ever played, so I'm definitely getting that vibe that this is a living, breathing world. And everything looks really fleshed out in that way. I like the fact that this guy actually took fall damage here. They confirmed that you're going to be having fall damage. They might have mentioned that before, but a lot of people have concerns about little things like this. I don't like jumping off of a cliff and not getting hurt. It doesn't make sense. It just has more realism to it. The whole time I was watching this, I just wanted to play it because it very much channeled that old feeling that I had with EQOA, and you just don't get that from MMOs anymore, where people actually group up and you have to move through the content in order to see the world and progress. We don't see that a lot. I really, really want to get in on some of this early alpha stuff. I don't know if maybe if I talk to Brad, he'll let me get in on alpha, maybe when they start opening up alpha. But I'm sure that'll entail having to sign an NDA, so I won't be able to bring you guys any behind-the-scenes stuff. But still, it'll be amazing to be able to get in there and test this out for myself. I am dying to do that. I wish I could do it right now. You guys are going to have to forgive me. I get a little excited and I start to just ramble on. I want to get back to my footnotes here. I took a lot of notes. The area that they're exploring here, it was called Arendir's Pass, Black Dagger Keep, and they also go into a dungeon. So they only showed us a very limited part of the map, but it looked a lot like High Keep or High Pass for those of you who are EQOA veterans such as myself. I love that. The nostalgia of that is just through the roof. It looked like the bandit camp when they were fighting these mercenaries, and man, just the nostalgia here alone, the fact that you have to sit down to regenerate your mana, and some people don't like that, but I like that, guys, because part of the reason why people don't stop to talk in modern MMOs is because there's no downtime. They just run dungeons as fast as they can at breakneck speed. Nobody's talking, and it's so impersonal. Slowing things down a bit, there's pros and cons to it, but I think that the pros outweigh the cons. And this is something that I was discussing with my wife. She's like, oh, I remember having to do that in EQA. I hated that. Yeah, but it gave people the opportunity to get to know each other. That's how you made friends. You don't realize that. I think a lot of people forget that because it can be an annoyance having to slow the combat down and sit down and regenerate. But it lends more towards communicating with people. Another thing that I thought was interesting is they have this endurance system where it seems like you have to eat food. If you're not well fed, your endurance might not regenerate at a high enough rate or at all. So that's very cool. They talked a little bit about crafting and said that because there are concerns from people saying, well, are we just going to get drops? Is it going to render craftables completely useless and vice versa? They said that they want to have an emphasis on crafting. They want people to be buying things like consumables from other players. That's something that they really want to focus on. And I'm not certain if they're going to have crafted gear that is better than anything that drops or if they're going to try to strike a balance. This is something that I think is really hard for developers to do because it doesn't really seem like there's a right or a wrong way to do it. Some people prefer to get those epic drops. Some people prefer to just be able to craft gear that makes that look silly by comparison. So I'm not certain which way they're going to take that, but I do like the fact that they seem to be wanting to rely on the community for things like food and drink. Something that I also found interesting is that they really don't want to have maps in this game. They want to go the old EQ and EQOA route, and they don't want to put that in the game. They want you to feel like you're actually living in this world and you have to memorize where things are, and that's something that EQOA really did well. It's funny, but to this day I can still pick up that game and, well, the emulator, and I can go through and I can remember how to get somewhere without even looking at the map, just by identifying landmarks like trees and rocks and things like that. Quest givers would tell you take a left at the shack and go follow the river upstream, and then take a right when you get to this tree. And these are things that really stick with you. All these years later, I still remember how to get to certain areas in EverQuest Online Adventures, whereas if you're just looking at the map, or you're just, even worse, auto running there, which is convenient, but let's be honest, you don't really feel like you live in the world. It doesn't feel lived in at that point. It just takes away from that. They said that there's probably going to be mods and stuff. I don't know if they're officially going to allow people to have these mods, but I do know that people are going to come up with them. We're going to be having maps and things like that. Back in the old EQOA days, I actually had to print up my map, so it actually felt like I was charting through the land. I held the physical map in my hand, and it showed me where to go, and all I had was the compass up in the top right, as you can see there. And I believe they said on that compass it's gonna function like a mini map, and it'll show you like the dot where group members are, which is very much EQOA. EQA did that same exact thing. Now, just to clarify, I'm not certain if that's what they meant by the minimap as the compass, or if there is indeed a minimap that will show you the area and give you a general idea of where your friends are. Now, just as a side note, Brad McQuaid has been known to stop by here and check out my videos. Brad, if you see anything that I'm messing up, please feel free to leave a comment down below just to clarify, and I will put it in annotations to correct it. For all you guys into PvP, one of the funny things that was happening during the stream is they had a group trailing them, and they were just kind of behind them, and it looked like they dropped a train on them at one point. And they were just kind of fooling around saying, hey, if you guys don't back up, you know, you're going to get it, and we're going to loot your corpse and that kind of thing. So they were just kind of showcasing how PvP could be. It could get really tense, people moving in and chaosing your mobs, maybe training you, things that we remember from the old days. They said that they want to have PvP and PvE servers so that people can get what they want. One thing that I found really refreshing is they said that the PvP and PvE should not interfere with each other. For example, let's say your Necromancer is a little overpowered in PvP. If you catch a nerf in PvP, it's not going to affect you in PvE. You won't see your performance in PvE taking a drop, and that's really refreshing. I hate that in games, and I'm sure all of us have experienced that. It's not very pleasant, so that will not be a problem here. Now, this is something that I've known for a while. Some of you might have heard about this, but they're going to have climates in the game. Different climates, like hot climates, cold climates, and if you're not prepared for those, well, you're not going to have a good time. You're probably going to die. They're going to have things such as toxic climates where you might need maybe a certain kind of suit or maybe some sort of mask. It reminds me a lot of Plane of Disease from EQOA. I don't know if it was the same with EverQuest, but you had to have a zombie flesh suit to even step foot in there or you would not survive. Kind of off topic, but not really. The new Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild is going to be doing something similar, where Link won't be able to go in the desert if he isn't prepared. He's not going to be able to go into the frozen north if he's not prepared. So it seems like a lot of games are doing this, and it does add that extra layer of realism. Darkness in this game is something that you're going to have to be aware of. It gets really, really dark. As they went through this dungeon, you could see how dark it was, and it started to get dark outside as they were making their way up towards the dungeon. But man, if you don't have torches, you're not going to be able to see what the hell you're doing. I don't know if they're going to have some sort of spell maybe that you can use to make things brighter. Maybe something that goes around your head, kind of like Elder Scrolls, like a candlestick, or maybe Night Eye, a potion that you can drink that helps you see in the dark. Things like that will probably be in the game, but torches are going to be easily accessible and something that you're going to have probably from the onset. This is something that I don't have much experience with, to be honest. I didn't play EverQuest when it was doing this. I guess way back when EverQuest was new, it was really dark. And I think there were also mobs that were more dangerous that would come out at night. I'm not certain if they're going to have this in Pantheon. I think they said previously that that's something they want to do, but I think that that is absolutely brilliant. At night, you should see things like vampires and undead and maybe more creepy things like that coming out of the woodwork. Now, as they progressed through this dungeon, they said that dungeons are going to be very much wide open. They're not going to be instanced. So you might run into a dungeon and find a group. You might run into a dungeon and find that people are camping the mob that you want to kill. And it's one of the trade-offs. It's something that can be frustrating. I do remember people camping mobs for days. This certainly appears to be doing the same thing. I don't know if they're going to have any instances at all. Maybe they will have some dungeons that are instanced, but it doesn't appear to be that way so far. The game appears to be very much lived in. You're not going to just walk into instances where you're by yourself, just with your group. And, I personally, I can see the benefits of instances, but at the same time, I do tend to lean more towards wide open worlds. Now, the world itself, it's going to be open world, but you will be loading between zones. That doesn't really bother me too much. I do prefer to have just no loading at all, completely seamless, like what I remember from EQOA. But EQOA couldn't have a lot of art things. They couldn't have like a lot of art assets and buildings everywhere. There was a lot of empty space in that game because I think it's just because they couldn't really load things. There are games that progressively load as you go along, and that's how they seem to get around it. But it doesn't really bother me that much because the zones seem absolutely massive and the loading screens don't seem like they take that long. It does, I have said in the past that even the smallest load screen does kind of take you out of the world just a little bit, but it's not something that really is a game breaker for me. As long as the world feels lived in, which it does, what I'm seeing here looks very much breathable and alive, then I don't really have a problem with that. And speaking of lived in, they have a perception system where they needed to find a key. They came up to a door that they could not open, and then they remembered seeing this pillar that said it was very old, and they had to go back to that pillar and search the rubble, and then the key appeared, which Brad commented is something that is better than just having a quest to go kill 5 guys and they drop a key. It gives just a little bit more to the world, and it adds a perception system that they can use, and they can utilize that just to give the world a little bit more depth. I think that's important. And some people might say, oh, that's not really a big deal. So what? You search some rubble and there's a key. It's not really innovative. Who cares? Well, here's the thing, guys. Every little small detail like that, every little thing that they put in like that, and please, Visionary Realms, I hope you hear me, continue to do that. Because that's something that makes your world feel lived and it makes it feel alive. I absolutely appreciate little things like that, and I'd love to see more of that in the future. Speaking of lived in, there are going to be several different entrances to different areas, such as dungeons. You won't just have one entrance. There could be an entrance on the other side, maybe off to the side somewhere. Maybe you can climb up through something to get into the dungeon or drop down into it. But they're going to have different ways to get in, and that's something that I appreciate. Dungeons aren't going to be something that you go into half-heartedly and you rush through with a group and you queue up and you just run through it like World of Warcraft and then you're done. It's something that is going to be like a commitment from what I remember from my EQOA days. When you go into a dungeon and you start going through things, all of a sudden it hits you. Holy shit, how do I get out of here? Could I get out of here right now if I had to? No, I don't think that I could because we've been going for so long. It's really an hour-long, 2-hour, 3-4-hour-long adventure when you go into a dungeon. So you better be ready for that shit. You better be committed for that dungeon because you're going to be in there for a while. Now, it did look like when you die, you go back to the start of the dungeon. I don't know if maybe you go back to wherever you bind it. I can't confirm one way or another. This might just be something that they were doing. This could have been dev tools that brought them back for convenience sake for the stream. But traditionally in EQOA, and I believe the classic EverQuest, if you died, you went all the way back to where you were bound. So that could entail a long, long trip trying to get back to where you were. And of course, that brings me to my next point, death penalties. How bad is the death penalty going to be? Well, they said it's going to be somewhere between Vanguard and Classic EverQuest. They don't want it so that people just get completely frustrated and they're afraid to explore, so that they don't explore because they're afraid of death and they take it too easy. They want people out there exploring the world, but at the same time, they don't want people to just have no respect for the world and feel like they can just zerg into whatever they want. You have to strike a balance there, and it's something they haven't nailed down yet. It's something they're going to be testing out, and they also said that certain servers might have more of a relaxed death penalty than others. Some might be more strict, and I think that's really nice. I think that's cool because, I mean, some people just don't want that death penalty. They want to just be able to zerg, and that's fine if that's the kind of person you are. Personally, I like the fear of death. I don't want it to be too harsh. I don't want to die and then start de-leveling. That's something that gets on my nerves. But I think there should be some debt there, something like classic EverQuest Online Adventures to where you have to get out of debt. It was frustrating, but at the same time, it just got your adrenaline going. Like, especially when you're in a dungeon, if you're going through a dungeon, you're scared. You don't know what the hell's going to be around the corner, and it almost feels like survival horror at that point, because you're like, shit, if I die, everything that I did for the past hour could be for naught, and you really had to respect the world around you. Now, there's one thing that I wasn't entirely clear on. They mentioned crafting and resistances. They said there might be, for example, these crystals that not just everybody can handle. People who might have a certain resistance to those crystals can handle them better and can craft with them better. So if you try to pick up these crystals and you don't have any experience with them, they could actually poison you or damage you over time. Whereas someone who has built up the resistances maybe through gear or just through practice, you're going to be able to harvest those crystals without any problems at all. And I think that's very interesting. There again lies that lived-in stuff that I was talking about before. It feels realistic. It just adds that extra layer of depth. It's really the little things like that that I think are going to make this game special. Another thing that I think adds a lot of realism to the game is they said that certain NPCs might be predisposed to not liking healers, for example, and they might attack your healer, and no amount of taunting from the tank is going to peel them off. You just need to burn them down quickly. Little things like that I think are interesting. Some NPCs might not like fire. They see a torch, they might run away. They might behave in different ways. And these are some of the things that I think EverQuest Next was trying to touch on, and well, know how that went. Unfortunately, that was canceled, but little things like this are very important. I know I keep repeating myself, but I'm very impressed by this, and this is something that I'm very much looking forward to. Speaking of the little things, and yes, you guys have probably noticed the theme here. I love all the little details about this game. Certain weaponry is going to affect certain mobs in different ways. For example, if there is a skeleton, having a sword, a sharp sword might not be the best thing to use. It might do reduced damage as opposed to, say, using something blunt like a mace or a club. Because, as you all know, bludgeoning weapons are just going to completely obliterate something like bone. Maybe ghosts don't like fire magic. Maybe ghosts don't like silver weapons. I don't think that you'll have to have silver weapons in order to do damage like Morrowind. I believe Morrowind was one of the games that did that, where you just didn't do any damage to any kind of spectral entities at all unless you had silver. I don't think they're going that route, but it does appear that there's going to be reduced damage based on what you're using. So you're going to have to think about your enemies and what you want to bring to each battle. Now, one of the last things I want to talk about here is there was a boss in Black Dagger Keep. They did not fight this boss because they didn't want to spoil it. They said that the boss is going to have a lot to do with the lore in the area. So this is a game that is going to be lore rich. If you are a lore nerd, you're going to love this game. And I'm telling you right now, they've already got lore up on their main website right now at PantheonMMO.com. You guys are going to want to go check that out if that's something you're interested in. Now, in the interest of keeping this abridged, I'm not going to keep talking. I just want to have some closing thoughts here. I think this is looking amazing. I am extremely hyped for this. I think it's a breath of fresh air. It's not trying to be everything for everyone. It's not trying to appeal to a mass market. This is a game for classic fans of the genre. This is a game for me and most of my subscribers, and I love that. I think it takes balls of steel to do that in today's market. But, you know, if you take a look at the games that have really tried to reach above and beyond, like EverQuest Next, for example, that didn't work out. This is a game that is very much grounded. It knows what it wants to be from the onset. I am incredibly proud of Brad McQuaid and everybody over at Visionary Realms. I mean, I remember when this was Kickstarted, and the Kickstarter didn't go out, didn't really finish up well. It was a failure, let's be honest. It did not go through. And I thought, oh man, this is just going to fall apart. But no, these guys have stuck through it. They've actually expanded. They have more employees now, and things are just looking really, really good. There's something that I want to do just kind of as a side note. I want to go through and keep all of the footage throughout the development of this game so I can just show how far they've come. I can't even imagine the amount of pride that these guys must have watching this world just being built around them as they put it together, as they go through and play test it. I can't even imagine the pride that comes with that. I mean, this is an underdog story if I've ever seen one, guys. This is something that is just, it's come from nothing, and so far it's looking absolutely amazing, and I cannot wait to get my hands on it. I cannot wait to see more. Right now, I want to kick it over to you guys. What are your thoughts on this podcast? What are your thoughts on the game? If you're new here, welcome to the channel. You're going to want to hit that subscribe button because I'm going to be covering this game extensively. If you guys enjoyed this video, please remember to rate it thumbs up. I thank you all for watching, and I look forward to seeing you all in my next video.